What's going on, guys? It's your boy Amar Rashad, as I am Canico, CEO, founder, you know what I'm saying? All those things. And today we're going to talk about pop-ups, man. We're going to talk about, how to get in a pop-up, what to look for in a pop-up, the supplies that you need, and then how to choose what the best pop-up is for you. I know as candle makers, pop-ups is a big thing for craft makers and small businesses in general. So we're going to talk about what to look for. We're going to talk about what you might need, and we're going to talk about how to choose the right pop-up, okay? Let's get into it. All right, so how do you look or find pop-ups? So one thing that I did was just get on the internet. A lot of cities have pop-ups. They have, these community events. They have these citywide events. I know for us, we would have like art walks or like these big events where, that's going on in the city, or these big community events that's going on. I know some neighborhoods, depending on if you live like in a certain community or HOA type of neighborhood, they might have like a community day or, so kind of just looking out and just seeing what the city has to offer. Also getting on the internet, you have farmers markets and, you have pop-ups. You just have to kind of just Google them. Instagram and TikTok are important. I use that a lot to find, different farmers markets. I go in there searching pop-ups, or I go in there and I search farmers markets, and I'll see, what's going on. And, a lot of times right on those pages, right on those websites, they have, vendor, vendor markets on there, and you can kind of, see what they have, put an interest letter in or apply or, different things like that. It's really not that hard. It's just probably the most tedious part is just compiling your list of different pop-ups. But, I think every city, I know major cities, but I think even smaller cities, they have, these different places that you can go for pop-ups. If you can't find any big pop-ups, one thing that I would do is I do like churches, or I do like I said, community events or seasonal events. So, maybe a Christmas time event somebody might be doing, or Halloween, trunk or treat or something like that. Schools might have different events. If you have, friends or family that's in education, or, different things like that, put out feelers with them and let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing. Or, if your stuff is quality and people like it, they'll tell you, hey, man, we got this, school event going on we want you at, or we got this church event that was going on that we want you at. Or, different community centers have community events as well that they might need vendors. I started on the internet, and then like I would just have family and friends tell me, hey, this is what's going on. Or I would just go to different pop-ups in the city. Like I would go to different markets in the city, and and then I would go back and I would Google, okay, how do I get on this market? Another thing that I would do is sometimes you have flea markets that need vendors. Obviously you're paying a booth rent, for whatever you're selling, a monthly booth rent, but that might be helpful. I think one was only like, for me, it was like $300 a month. And that was for like a flea market. Like that was for the booth that they was giving you. Obviously you might not have no AC or no heat or nothing like that. But for $300 a month, if you only sell, X amount of candles, or you could sell more than that, that might be something for you to do as like a small business. You know what I mean? You might not need nothing major. So that's how I found pop-ups, and that's kind of where you look for pop-ups. So the next thing is, what do you need to do a pop-up? So most times all you need is to have a table, some chairs, a simple setup, something that you could kind of do that's easy. For me, I just did a table. I got two little crates from Target. They was $5 a piece. I put my candles up there, and then I have a little board, with my information on it, and I'll put it on the table. And I got that from, before I used like a whiteboard, but I got that from like Five Below and different things like that, because you need a sign. People got to know who you are. And then as time goes on, you get the, the tall signs or the banners or whatever you might need for yourself. But that's what I started with. I just had a simple setup, a table. I had these crates on the side of the table. And then I have my candles just set up on the table. And then I have like a little sign, as I am Candleco, with whatever the price is. And that's just what I did. And I did that for a lot of them. And some of them you might need a tent, because some of them might not provide tents. So that's another thing that I would get, is I would get a tent, because a lot of them, they are outside, unless you get one that's inside. But either way, you'll get your little space. Use this like a 10 by 10 space. You can set it up how you want to. You can design it by how you want to. But I did it the cheapest way I could. Get a nice tablecloth, put it on there, crates, boom, sign, boom, set your candle up, design it how you want to, and then like, depending on if it was like Christmas or something, I might put some lights up, or I might go get some stuff for Dollar Tree to kind of hang up depending on the season that it was. I did that for Valentine's Day. I did that for Christmas, Halloween, whatever it is. And that's a cheap way to be able to set up your pop-up and then get into the pop-up, so that's kind of what you need. A simple setup is all you need, just something to kind of get started, and you can build out as you go. All right, so the third thing is, how do I choose which pop-up is right for me? First off, you need pricing. So pricing is important, because if you're not a candle maker or, crafts maker that's doing a lot of sales, you're not going to do a pop-up that's expensive. You know what I mean? You're not going to do a $200, $300 pop-up, because just a lot of people think that just because you pay that price, that means that you're going to get more than that in sales. And that's not always true. Sometimes with these events, you're just paying to be in the vicinity of the traffic. You know what I mean? So it's important to, yes, get traffic, but it's also important to, if I'm not the only candle maker at this event, and one thing that I always try to do is, if it's an event that I'm thinking about getting in, I would just go to their other events and I'll see what they have. Whether it's a church event, whether it's a community event, other pop-ups, I would just go out and see what they have. I would go there first. I went to a bunch of farmers market, just for myself, but I also would see, okay, this is a pop-up that I'm thinking about getting into. Let me go see how much traffic they have. How many other candle vendors do they have out there? Will there be a space for me? Is it inside, outside? Which one's going to be better? So that way I know when I'm applying online, when I'm paying my fee, I know what I'm getting into. So pricing is important. Because like I said, if you're not making a lot of money, paying a lot for a pop-up is not necessarily going to make sense. Sometimes you might just need a smaller area. You might not need one pop-up I did. It wasn't a large pop-up, but it was something that they did every week, and the community would come out every week. It wasn't a large community, but they would come out every week. These people get familiar with your face. They get familiar with who you are, and then they want to support you because they see you out here every week, So traffic is important. Location is important. You don't want to go somewhere where it's going to be, you got to drive all the way over here to, go wherever you need to go. You need to drive all the way over there. Maybe at first you might need to, if you feel like those pop-ups are worth it, but you also got to think about travel time, gas, the time it's going to take to set up and break down, and all those different things. Those are things you want to factor in. So, when you're choosing, pricing is important. Choose one that's reasonable for you. Just because you pay more money doesn't mean you're going to make more money all the time. Sometimes ones that are less money might bring you more, because it's not the amount of foot traffic, it's the kind of foot traffic you're getting. If you're the only candle maker, and there's only one or two of your two candle makers, and your candles are different than this person's candles, then you have a chance to make more money. Also, your pricing is important. For pop-ups and different things like that, you don't want to outprice yourself. You don't want to price yourself so high that the people can't come in and buy what you have. I usually would do sales for my pop-up. So I usually would just do it a little cheaper than whatever I would put on my website, because then people will say, okay, what do you usually charge? This is what I usually charge, but this is my special for the day. Whether that's true or not, they don't know that. And I'm not saying you go out there to try to finesse people, but whether that's true or not, they don't know that. But you don't want to price it too high. Also look at other candle makers that kind of price what you do, because if y'all make the same kind of candles and theirs might be a little cheaper, it doesn't mean that your quality is not better, but sometimes the customer might not see that, and they might say, okay, well, they had the same candles, theirs are cheaper. I like their scents. They got similar things. Let me just go over here. Because at the end of the day, I'm still trying to get a bang for my buck as a customer. So you have to kind of figure those things out, what's going to work best for you. Price it reasonable. Don't overprice yourself. You can also raise your price as you go on. Don't outprice the market. So I wouldn't do something that's super expensive, at that market. If you have items that are cheaper, maybe do a cheaper item. A couple people might come out there and buy a more expensive item, but that's not guaranteed. So pricing is important, traction is important, and location is important. Finding a good location for yourself. It doesn't mean it has to have thousands of people running through. Maybe dozens of people, maybe a couple hundred people might be good for you too. So anyways, these are the things to look for in a candle pop-up, farmer's market. I spoke to you about how to find a pop-up, where to look for it, what kind of things that you need, as far as like your setup, and then how to choose, what's right for you. That's the important thing, is finding a market that's right for you. I think the most important thing is finding something that you could be consistent with. You might not need to do a bunch of markets, but if you can find a market that that's going to work for you, and that might be trial and error, but something that you could do consistent, and the people can get to know your name, your face, and what you do, I think that's the most important thing. So that's the candle pop-up, man. That's how to find it. That's what to look for and what you need. So till the next time, it's your boy Mod, as I am Candle Co, CEO and founder. All that. See you. Peace.